You like battle cruiser magic, you just want to play a bunch of big creatures and beat people up with them, well maybe Maelstrom Wanderer is the choice for you. It's a very all-in deck, but my build has a bit of extra resilience, and I'm going to show you why. So this is what the deck list looks like, but ultimately, what matters more in your Maelstrom Wanderer deck list construction is the overall theme and balance of cards, not so much the actual cards themselves in a lot of cases. A lot of the pieces are pretty replaceable, except for a few, and I'm going to go right over here to look at that. We've got Maelstrom Wanderer, of course, creatures you control have haste, cascade, cascade. This lets you get a ton of powerful creatures out quickly. But then, the option I've gone for is a companion Karuga the Macro Sage. See? This deck really wants to ramp out quickly as soon as possible to get Maelstrom Wanderer out, but then once he's hit the battlefield, if someone doesn't kill him for you when you untap, you often are struggling to play a turn or two later, and you can kind of run out of steam. But with Karuga, making most of the things in our deck costing 3 or more, and then we're going to cascade into them, and we're going to try and ramp, and it gets us a lot of permanence, and it's quite often this is going to be drawing you 7 cards, and when your commander's 8 mana, this costing 8 mana isn't even that big of a cost. So by building our deck with this additional restriction, we get to just keep going and going and going, even if Maelstrom Wanderer sticks on the battlefield, giving our creatures haste, which by itself is fine. So how do we achieve this? Well, I got the deck here split up into briefly 2 categories of about 30 cards each. We have the ramp, and we have the actual spells. Now 30 ramp cards is a lot for your average deck, but you will notice quite a few of these fill a double purpose. For example, Thrix is a creature with 4 power that can deal some decent flying damage, but also reduces your spell's mana cost. We have cards like Greater Tanuki and Beanstalk Giant, which can ramp you on 3 mana, but if you cascade into them later with Maelstrom Wanderer, they can still attack opponents and kill them. And then you might be thinking, if you skip out on 1 and 2, that's where a lot of the best ramp is. How are you going to cast your Soul Rings? Well, you can't play Soul Ring in this deck, which whenever I reveal Karuga, I do like to say I'm not playing Soul Ring, because I think it's kind of funny. But it isn't even that bad. I would say it's on average a turn slower than not having the early ramp, and you can still get your commander out on turn 5 quite consistently. How do we do this? Well, a lot of our cards that ramp for 2 already. If we have cards like Worn Power Stone, if we have cards like Overgrowth, these are ramping for 2 already, and then all of our 4 drops and some 5 drops are basically ramping for double as it is. We still play some cards like Cultivate and Harrow that only ramp for 1, but they still give you 2 lands, so you can keep the mana flowing. And then there are some additional cards in this special column here, which these 5 cards in particular, and arguably Temple, you don't play in the average commander deck, but are insane here, because they let you get your commander out a turn early by interacting and ramping on those turns when you might not be able to otherwise. Search for Tomorrow, you can play for 1 mana on turn 1 or 2, and it's going to cast itself later. We don't really need that mana until we have 8 anyway, so this is basically all upside. It lets us use our turn 1 and turn 2 mana. Again, Rifts are the same thing on a creature, and then 2 unique commander cards, Rousing Refrain and Venture Forth, both fill this role. We can cast them on turn 2 for their suspend cost, and then they're going to come out a few turns later and help us ramp up, potentially a turn earlier. And then alongside this theme as well, we've got Gemstone Caverns, which in a multiplayer game, you're more likely to be going 2nd, 3rd or 4th than first, which can make it a powerful option. Now it does have to be in your opening hand and it costs you a card, but if it gets Maelstrom Wanderer out a turn earlier, that's basically drawing you 2 extra cards a turn earlier, which with Karuga is then going to draw you 2 actual cards the turn after. So it's almost free, and if you draw it as a coloured source, well, with all of this fixing as well as ramping, we don't tend to struggle for colours too often. Then Temple of the False Gods is a constant debate in Commander, but in this deck, it lets you play your commander a turn earlier, and when your commander's 8 mana, that is big game. Now otherwise, what I do like about this deck, this is a relatively budget deck. I've got the price on screen now, but you can kind of run anything as long as it's big mana and is going to hit opponents. Some cards are better than others, like a Genesis Ultimatum is always going to be a fantastic choice. Things like Kiora Beats the Sea God are going to give you something big to hit people with next turn, and then if they've got something that you can't deal with, you can take control of it or tap it to get a big attack ready. Just whatever you like, whatever big creatures you like fit into this deck. Now, the way I do like to run it is minimum interaction. We're going all in. We have interaction, but it's on our 6 drops, and that this one, doesn't even kill a creature. This kills some creatures. We want to be making sure that all of our cards that aren't ramping are going to attack our opponents, because that's just how I like to play Magic. One of the only things that doesn't go over this is Blasphemous Act here, because it costs 9 mana, which means we can't cascade into it. but actually it's going to cost 1 mana most of the time. So sometimes you can play this and then immediately follow up with a Maelstrom Wanderer, which is beautiful. Now, if you want to look at the more individual card choices, I am going to be playing some games with this deck on the channel, so you can check those out and see how these play in action. But basically, as long as you keep to those core themes I played with, the Karuga variant of this deck is very, very fun. Now, I think it's a tried and true saying at this point, but I think it's about a power level 7 for this deck, because the way I built it, there's no infinite combos, there's Spider Kiki Jiki, that's just for copying for value, and your plan is just to play big things in ramp, and if people interact with that and stop it, it can make you slow down a lot. If people just leave your ramp going, you're going to get this guy out turn 5 and you're going to be off to the races. But if not, you're going to stall and stumble quite a bit. But that does mean when it does go off, it can feel like you're just casting an unstoppable chain of spells that people might think is a little bit unfair. But that's what our deck's trying to do. Thanks for watching. Gameplay video coming up soon. Take care.